Hello and welcome to the Ancient Egypt exhibition. I am Cleopatra and I will take you back in time to 3000 years before century to get a virtual reality experience about this civilization. I will be your guide in this journey, so let's start by entering the exhibition gate. Welcome to the basement. Here will be an introduction to the exhibition. You will explore Egyptians' everyday life. Egyptian pottery was made with clay. They used pottery to hold water as well as cooking food. It was also considered as an art form as Egyptians used it to reflect their creativity and imagination. Some were placed as decoration in the tombs and pharaohs' palace. People lived beside the Nile, and Egyptian houses were almost all built from bricks of Nile mud. The mud was carried in baskets from the Nile and poured into molds. When the mud in the mold was dry, it was turned out and left to bake in the heat of the sun. The oldest game from ancient Egypt was called Senet. It is a board game that was played by many of the members of the royal families, including Tutankhamun.
Women in ancient Egypt had many rights. Women had the same governmental rights as men. The main role for women was to run the family and have children. Although women and men were mostly equal in the government, women could not inherit the pharaoh position like men. Most middle-class and lower-class women were illiterate, meaning that they could not read or write. This was because the girls were taught at home. Their mothers would teach them housework while the boys would be going off to school. Usually, women helped their husbands in their jobs, but many had their own jobs. For example, upper-class women could be courtiers or priestesses. Middle-class women could be singers, dancers, gardeners, or even doctors. Whatever their job was, women played an important role in ancient Egypt.
Egyptians believed that each individual would have a life similar to the one that they lived. In order to have that kind of life, their body needed to be preserved and they needed to be buried with all of the possessions that they would take with them on their journey into the afterlife. Welcome to the school. In this room, you will get to know about the education aspect of Egyptians and their writing script. The most famous script is hieroglyphic, which uses pictures as symbols. Hieroglyphics were carved or painted on stone monuments, tombs, and temples. Rosetta Stone is a rock stele found in 1799, with a decree that appears in 3 scripts: ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, Demotic script, and Greek. This provided the key to the modern understanding of Egyptian hieroglyphs. Egyptian classrooms had tables for children to use to write on, similar to the ones we have nowadays, and lessons were taught by teachers. Welcome to the temple. Here you will know more about the religious aspect of Egyptians and their gods. Horus was the Egyptian god of the sky. He was normally shown as a falcon or a falcon-headed man. After fighting his uncle Seth, he became the king of Egypt. During this fight, he lost his eye. The eye of Horus became one of the most powerful amulets in ancient Egypt. Key is an Egyptian symbol for the key of life. Egyptian gods are often portrayed carrying it by its loop, and it's believed that it represents the gods offering the gift of life. It is thought that the ankh was in burial tombs as a symbol of life after death.
Hello and welcome to All Top Fives. I've always been fascinated by ancient Egyptian culture and mythology, and that's largely because of their incredible range of deities. There was a god or a goddess for most activities, daily objects and concepts, from the glorious to the scary to the downright weird. Here are 5 especially interesting ancient Egyptian deities. Number 5. Meshkent. First up is the goddess of childbirth, Meshkent or Meshkenet. She was one of the earliest deities worshipped by ancient Egyptians. Meshkent took 2 different forms. Most often she was depicted as a brick with the head of a woman. This is because in ancient Egypt, women usually gave birth while squatting upon a pair of special birthing bricks, and Meshkent was associated with this delivery method. Her other form was more symbolic, taking the form of a woman with a cow's uterus on top of her head, wearing it as a headdress. Bizarre as this image may seem to us, this goddess was highly revered, as she was responsible for breathing the ka, or the life spark, into babies at their birth. She was also involved in the process of rebirth after death, testifying if the dead person was worthy of being reborn. One story from an old papyrus scroll tells of Meshkent overseeing the birth of a set of triplets. She prophesied that each one of them would become a pharaoh, and it turned out that way, as they became the first 3 kings of the 5th dynasty. Number 4. Khepera. Appearing in ancient Egyptian texts as a scarab beetle, and sometimes a man with a scarab beetle for a head, Khepera was a god with a symbolic origin. Although he was never worshipped by a devoted cult as many other gods were, Khepera was widely accepted as the deity associated with the scarab beetle. The scarab was a common creature in ancient Egypt. It's known for rolling huge balls of dung into a hole in the ground and laying its eggs in them. When these eggs hatched and dozens of scarabs swarmed out of the dung ball, the Egyptians would see this as a form of creation and rebirth. Add this to the symbolic image where the dung ball represents the morning sun and the beetle rolls it across the sky, and you arrive at the god Khepera. As a solar deity, Khepera was often seen as an aspect of the almighty sun god Ra, and amulets in the shape of scarab beetles are often seen in jewellery and seals, which are in his honour. Number 3. Horus. If you know anything about ancient Egyptian mythology, you'll recognise Horus, or at least his name. One of the most significant of all the gods and goddesses, Horus was worshipped all across Egypt as patron god. He was depicted as a man with the head of a falcon, often wearing a red and white crown. This symbolised his status as king of Egypt. The reason I've chosen Horus isn't because he's unusual or particularly strange, but because of one particular story from ancient papyrus scrolls. It's a bit weird. Horus was documented as having an ongoing war with Set, the god of the desert. Set had killed Horus's father and was in contention with Horus for ruler of Egypt, a double whammy. After one of their many battles, Set attempted to show how he could dominate Horus once and for all by seducing him and forcing intercourse. However, the crafty Horus sneakily caught Set's semen in his hands rather than be inseminated. He threw this semen into the river. Horus then spread some of his own semen onto a lettuce, Set's favourite food. He tricked Set into eating that particular lettuce. Then they agreed to go before the other gods to settle their feud. The gods listened to Set claiming he had dominated Horus. They called forth his semen for proof, but when they did, the semen in the river shone for all to see, invalidating Set's claim. Horus then made his own claim of dominance, and when the semen was called forth, it caused the foolish Set, who had eaten the lettuce, to shine. He was defeated, eventually relinquishing control of the throne of Egypt. This story is one of my favourites as it's so disgustingly bizarre, and it gets Horus to number 3 on my list. Number 2. Hair. Although nowadays hair implies weak amusement, to the ancient Egyptians it was something far more sacred. Hair was the god of infinity. His name actually means endlessness. He was depicted as a bearded man with the traditional wig, holding a notched palm branch in each hand. These palm branches represented time, as temples used them to keep time in religious rituals and ceremonies. Although Hair is usually depicted as a man, sometimes he was shown as a frog, and old texts state that he was actually formless, an abstract concept turned god. As a result, he wasn't worshipped by any one dedicated cult, but his image was often worn on amulets, symbolising the wearer's wish for a long life. Indeed, hair was often used as a hieroglyph in the ancient Egyptian language, representing the number 1,000,000. Despite having no form, Hair was believed to have existed before the universe came into being, making him another mysterious and wonderful addition to this top 5 list. Number 1. Ammut. Now we finish with a real monster. Literally meaning devourer, Ammut was a female demon who lived in the ancient Egyptian underworld. She was depicted as having the head of a crocodile, the forequarters of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus, and she dwelled next to the scales of justice. It was believed that every deceased person had to pass tests before they were allowed into the afterlife. In the Hall of Two Truths, the deceased's heart would be placed on the scales of justice and weighed against a feather from the goddess of truth. If the soul was impure, Ammut would immediately devour the heart, preventing the person from continuing to the afterlife. Because of this, Ammut wasn't worshipped as a patron god at all, but instead she was feared by the ancient Egyptians for her ability to obstruct their path to heaven. She was also associated with the Lake of Fire, where evil souls were destroyed. Certainly a god that you don't want to mess with. Her appearance alone was enough to cause even the most devout to tremble. Hello and welcome to All Top 5s. I've always been fascinated.
The scarab beetle symbolized the restoration of life. It also symbolizes the scarab beetle god Kepra, which was believed to push the setting sun along the sky in the same manner as the beetle with his ball of dung. Anubis was shown as having the head of a jackal, the tail of a lion, and the body of a human. He was linked to the mummification process where bodies were preserved as well as the journey to the afterlife. Welcome to the Pharaoh's Palace. Here you will know about some pharaohs that ruled Egypt. Amenemhat was the first ruler of the 12th dynasty. The dynasty is considered to be the golden age of the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. He ruled from 1991 BC to 1962 BC. Nefertiti was an Egyptian queen and the great royal wife of Akhenaten. Nefertiti and her husband were known for a religious revolution in which they worshipped one god only, Aten, or the sun disk. Ramesses was the third pharaoh of the 19th dynasty of Egypt. He is often regarded as the greatest, most celebrated, and most powerful pharaoh of the Egyptian Empire. Amenophis II was the seventh pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt. Amenhotep inherited a vast kingdom from his father Thutmose III. Welcome to the pyramid. In this room you will get to know about the pyramids and their secrets. This is Menkaur's pyramid complex, which also has 3 Queen's pyramids. Khafre's pyramid complex appears larger than the adjacent Khufu pyramid by virtue of its more elevated location, in fact smaller in both height and volume. The most famous of all the true pyramids is Khufu's pyramid, and also known as the Great Pyramid of Giza, which is the largest of the 3 Giza pyramids.
Pyramid of Khufu is the oldest and largest of the 3 pyramids in Giza, on the outskirts of Cairo in Egypt. It is believed the pyramid was built as a tomb for 4th dynasty Egyptian pharaoh Khufu and was constructed over a 20-year period. The pyramid remained the tallest man-made structure in the world for nearly 4,000 years, unsurpassed until the spire of Lincoln Cathedral was completed in the 14th century. The Great Pyramid consists of an estimated 2.3 million limestone blocks. There have been varying scientific and alternative theories about the Great Pyramid's construction techniques. It is estimated that completing the building in 20 years would involve moving an average of more than 1 block into its place every 5 minutes, day and night. At completion, the Great Pyramid was covered by white casing stones that formed a smooth outer surface. What is seen today is the underlying core structure. Some of the casing stones that once covered the pyramid can still be seen around the base. The casing stones were fit together with extremely high precision. The mean opening of the joints was only ½ millimeter wide. The accuracy of the pyramid's workmanship is such that the four sides of the base have an average error of only 58 millimeters in length. The base is horizontal and flat to within 15 millimeters. There are 3 known chambers inside the Great Pyramid. The so-called Queen's and King's chambers are higher up within the structure. The lowest chamber, which was never finished, is cut into the bedrock, upon which the pyramid was built. Today, tourists enter the Great Pyramid via the Robbers' Tunnel, dug by workmen employed by Caliph al-Ma'mun around year 820. The Queen's Chamber is accessed via a steep and very narrow ascending passage. At the upper end, the passage joins the Grand Gallery, which is 8.6 meters high and over 46 meters long, and slopes upwards, leading to the King's Chamber. The only object in the King's Chamber is a rectangular granite sarcophagus, which is roughly finished and has a broken corner.
In ancient Egypt, the pyramids were used as tombs for pharaohs and sacrifices. They were also used as a place for worship and as astronomical tools. Egyptians also believed the smooth angled sides would help ascend pharaohs' souls to heaven. Sarcophagus in the King's Chamber. The only object which was found in the King's Chamber in the Pyramid of Khufu is a rectangular granite sarcophagus, one corner of which is broken. Unlike the fine masonry of the walls of the chamber, the sarcophagus is roughly finished, with saw marks visible in several places. This is in contrast with the finely finished and decorated sarcophagi found in other pyramids of the same period. I hope you had a great journey exploring Ancient Egypt exhibition and that you will expand your knowledge about this civilization in the future. See you soon!